Hello, I just wanted to walk you through everything on our new coral reef tank. So first I wanted to go through how the water flows through the tank and all the different types of filters on it. So as you see over here, there's the main pump. And so it's going to pull water in through these side channels. As you see, there's these grates on both sides, and then it comes back out in the middle. So it creates a circulating loop of water through the tank. And that's really important for all our corals because they need water flow over them for them to be able to be healthy. So now if we look in this back area, this is called the sump. So on this side we have our filter sock. This is just a really fine sort of fabric that will catch any sort of debris. So this is one of our mechanical filters on this tank. It's really important that these are cleaned out regularly, at least twice a week, but more if needed. And because otherwise, if it catches any sort of waste or debris and it sits in there for more than a few days and decomposes, it will then leach back into the water. And then it will flow through on this side. I'll get to that in a minute. But right here, we have our protein skimmer. So there's this little cup at the top. And then if you see in here, actually it's not working right now. But what this does is it aerates the water with micro bubbles, and different organic matter will cling to those bubbles and float up to the top and fill this cup up. And then you want to drain the cup and rinse it out every week just to get that waste out of there. And then back here we have our little refugium. So in here, this is called macroalgae as opposed to like the microalgae and nuisance algae in the display tank. So what this does is it'll grow and absorb any nutrients in the water before those nutrients feed the algae in the main tank. And so we'd rather this algae be growing rather than nuisance algae growing in the front. So now if we look in the front, so that was most of our mechanical filtration, and then all of our biological filtration is in the front. So in all of these rocks and sand, there's different bacteria which will help you get rid of ammonia and nitrite and turn that into nitrates, and then the algae in the back should absorb those nitrates, hopefully. All the like pink stuff on the coral, most of that is called coralline algae. So that's a very beneficial algae. It will absorb things in the water and just help keep the water a little bit cleaner. So anytime you clean rocks, you want to make sure not to scrape any of the coralline algae off. And this is what we call live rock. So it came from an aquaculture farm in South Florida. And there's different stuff on it. You can see like little sponges and worms and stuff. And all of that's just really cool stuff that helps this little ecosystem in our tank. So some other devices. So right now, this is turned off. This is our wave maker. So certain corals need a lot more flow than others. So you'd use this to create a stronger flow across the top of the tank for the corals that need it, and then keep corals that need less flow towards the bottom. But it's turned off right now just because you could see this little cardinal fish is struggling a little bit. He's not used to the current yet, so he's still growing the strength. And this thing, we don't really need the extra flow right now because this pump is creating a lot of flow already. And then I think the last piece of equipment we have is our automatic top off. So down here we keep our RO water. So this is just RO water. And then you can see up here, this is the sensor for it. So on the right side is the actual sensor for the water. And then this is the overflow sensor. So if this sensor were to ever break and just constantly be telling the pump to pump more RO water in, this thing would flow up and you can hear that beeping, and that would let you know that there's too much water in the tank, but that really should never happen. And then over here on the side is all of our control panel, kinda. It's a little bit of a mess right now, but so this is the RO we were talking about. So it should always be green for level, and then occasionally it will come on. If it's ever too low, that means either the pump is broken or the RO in the bottom is empty. And then right here, this is the controller for the wave maker, so you can control the speeds, and then it will pulse like real waves. So waves aren't just a continuous flow, they come and they recede. So it's all the different controls, but we're not using any of that right now, but you can see the different modes. Some of them are based on like a curve function. And then this is our heater controller. So the heater is in the back by the pump, and ideally the temperature should be exactly 78 degrees all the time. Coral is really sensitive, so as long as it's between like 76 and 80 degrees, it'll be okay, but you don't want it to fluctuate within a day. If over a few days it got a little warmer, that's one thing, but ideally it should be right around 78 degrees. The reason though it's set to 79 degrees is there's a controller on the heater itself as well. So this is just kind of like an extra set. So the actual temperature is controlled by the heater itself, not this. And then this is just a backup. So if that were to malfunction, it would cut power to the heater before it gets too hot. And then this is our lighting controller. So you see the current time right here. It's a few minutes off, that's okay. And then all the different setups, there's all the manuals are in the under the cabinet, and you can read about it. But there's two channels. So channel 1 is the blue actinic lighting. So you can see right now the lighting is more blue. This is a lot more beneficial for corals, but not so much for the algae. So for the longest part of the cycle, we'll use the blue lighting, and then the white lighting is only on in a short part of that time. And then right now it's on a shorter lighter cycle, just to get the corals used to this tank, and then you can slowly increase it. But every time you add new corals, it's really stressful, and bright lights will stress them out. So you cut the light time down and then slowly increase it to get them used to the new tank. Eventually though, once we start doing more difficult corals, we'll need to get a brighter light for this tank so they have enough light. And then really we should be doing weekly water changes on this. So just make new salt water. Like a 5-gallon bucket is perfect. That's around a 15% water change on this tank. And the reason we do that is to introduce trace elements. So not only are we concerned about the actual salt, but the calcium and magnesium that corals need to grow. And then also pH. So water should be slightly basic, around ideally close to 8.6, but a little bit lower is okay. But corals are really sensitive to pH changes, so if it changes more than a little bit within a day, that can really hurt the corals, and they'll end up throwing out their zooxanthellae. So the way water changes help keep the pH stable by adding by increasing the alkalinity, and that's just kind of a buffer to the pH, so the water doesn't become more acidic. And then if we want to walk through the livestock right now, so you can see all the different cleaner crew. So up on the top of this rock, you'd see that is called a trochus snail, and trochus snails are going to eat different sorts of algae and stuff for you. And then these bigger snails are called turbo snails. They'll be really good at eating like the hair algae that's a problem on this rock right now. So they should be working on cleaning that up. And then the last kind, which may not be in here, but there's a different kind of snail called a Nassarius snail that will eat detritus and waste, but not algae. So they eat all the waste and extra food. And then there's also a couple of these little hermit crabs, and they're omnivores, so they'll scavenge around for algae or detritus, whatever they can find, any extra food that falls. And then the fish, obviously, so right now, this is a Banggai cardinal fish over here. He's a tank-bred fish, so he's aquacultured. He wasn't caught off a reef. And it's a lot smaller. It'll get probably twice its size eventually. And then our clownfish is just fairly standard clownfish that we moved from another tank. So the cardinal fish itself is will eat more live food, so like brine shrimp or live copepods, which you'll learn how to culture all of that to feed it. And then the clownfish will eat the same thing, but it will also eat more pellets and stuff. The cardinal just needs a little bit more of the live food, but if you start showing it the pellets or the frozen food that you feed the clownfish, it will start to learn to eat all of that. And then all of the corals. So we have 3 types of coral in here right now. So within the corals, you have soft corals, SPS, which is small polyp stony corals, and LPS, which is large polyp stony corals. So this down here is our pulsing zinnia, and it's not quite out and pulsing like it will sometimes. It just depends on how it's feeling. But this is a very fast growing coral. It's a soft coral, so it doesn't use like calcium or anything to build an exoskeleton. And the reason it's on this own separate rock is to keep it separate, because it will grow very fast and overgrow everything. So if it did somehow begin to grow on another rock, you'd want to pull that off and get rid of it before it overtakes everything. And then this red piece right here is a red Rhodactis mushroom coral. So it's another soft coral, so again, it doesn't need as many of the trace elements for it to grow. It's a little bit faster growing, but not quite as fast as the zinnia. And then the last one is the peppermint coral or candy cane coral. So this is a large polyp stony coral. So that stalk looking thing is it's calcium carbonate exoskeleton. So all of that is dead, and that's just kind of where it grows from, and that's how it's attached to the rock. Eventually, because this coral has been in a different tank where it wasn't doing too well, the water quality wasn't quite what it should be. So the polyps themselves, the green part on top, will be a lot bigger once it recovers, hopefully. You'll see them, if you look up pictures there, you can see what it's supposed to look like when it's healthy.